The year began with a jolly welcome back from the team on January 4th. A reminder was shared to not click any suspicious links or connect one's Web3 wallet to random websites, and to always check that information had come from official channels. This might have seemed like common sense, but it was delivered at a time where the NFT space was at full steam, with a lot of money to be made, but also a lot of money to be lost from just a few clicks. The excitement around the BYO ecosystem was real, and this was reflected within the sales of their assets. Some of the rarest assets saw multiple five-figure sales at the time, with a goddess selling for a staggering 70 ETH or $250,000. The hype was overflowing, but could it be sustained throughout 2022? Let's dive in. On January 9th, the team announced a partnership with Lost Boy, a music collective and mental health resource NFT project, who had created the first track of the BYOVERSE called The First Morning. It was said that music is a crucial element to the BYOVERSE in-game experience, and that they would continue to work with Lost Boy to bring their music expertise to develop an amazing soundtrack for those long BYOVERSE journeys. More on this later. The next series of announcements within the first half of January focused on updates to the Apostles metadata. When the Apostles were first minted, their media file was presented as a static image of the model. But at this time, the team were working on bringing the full animations to all Apostle metadata, as well as access to their 3D model files. On January 11th, it was said that Apostle claiming would be paused on January 14th for 5 days to allow for the metadata to update, citing some technical reasons as to why this needed to happen. However, when January 14th came around and the redeeming had just been paused, a sneak announcement caught the community off guard by saying, "Did you really think you'll be waiting too long? Animations updated." It was then announced that the 3D models would take some time due to exposing the API during the 5-day pause. A few days later, the community had managed to point out some minor discrepancies between the animation and their metadata, to which the team responded rapidly. But for the most part, the animations were well received and shared heavily all over platforms. As for access to the 3D models, the minor adjustments had extended the timeline needed to make this come true. But the team had said that those who just couldn't wait were free to reach out to them in advance. Fast forward to February, and this month was all about preparing for the BYOCraft claim. On February 1st, a heavily packed announcement was dropped. It started off by clarifying 2 points that had been raised in the past. First, BYOCrafts were now set to be claimed rather than previously thought of as being airdropped. This was due to the number of variables that were said to impact the outcomes of one's craft. And second, when BYOCrafts were first announced, it was said that they might be released on a Layer 2 chain, e.g., Polygon. But now the community was told that the technical lead, Dr. Ether J, was experimenting with contracts on Ethereum L1 to ensure that the gas fees were not too high. If they were, then the team would go ahead with the L2, but the final result was said to be announced shortly prior to launch. Next, a reminder was had that to claim a BYOCraft, one would need to have a BYOPill and BYOVAPE during the snapshot and during claim. The snapshot for BYOCrafts was then given a firm date of February 18th, with the claiming window said to open up shortly after. It was then reiterated that the addition of an Apostle to the BYOPill plus BYOVAPE combination would lead to a tier-specific BYOCraft, and that there would be a total of 5 different tiers of BYOCraft, with each tier having its own unique and generative set of traits and utility. The announcement then moved on to say that the point system, previously used in the Apostle minting mechanics, was being reintroduced, where BYOPills would impact the probability of rarer craft traits. Each pill would be assigned a score with 50% derived from physical pill traits and 50% derived from the sum of TRYP levels. It then detailed information on the BYOCraft stats and leveling system. This is where things became interesting. Aside from traits, BYOCraft metadata would include upgradable craft level, experience points, and stats. Experience to level up is gained from races, including the mini racer game and other future events to be released within the BYOVERSE. Wait. Hold on. Did the team just say, mini racer game? This sent the community wild. Stats would include acceleration, how fast the craft could increase its speed, durability, how much damage the craft could withstand, max speed, how fast the craft could move, and handling, how responsive the craft was, particularly in turns. At level 1, crafts are randomly assigned an equal number of stat points across the 4 different stats. But leveling up the craft would allow holders to receive stat points to allocate across the 4 to improve their craft. Then it was mentioned that craft tier would impact the number of EXP gained per race, but that all racers would still need to grind. Leveling up and improving craft stats would be reflected in the NFT metadata. Craft traits would tie directly to craft stats. The rarer the craft tier, the better collection of craft parts it has, which means overall higher permanent boosts to stats. That is, better craft traits and craft tiers would lead to higher base stat numbers. The announcement rounded off by stating that BYOCrafts would allow holders to play and earn, starting with the previously mentioned mini racer game, which would then be integrated into the BYOVERSE. All racers would be rewarded for participating in the game with either TRYP or the in-game currency. Details on earnings would be released closer to the mini-game launch, with no date announced at the time. Wow, what a detailed and mind-consuming announcement this was. Early on February 19th, it was announced that the snapshot had been taken for the BYOCraft claim, and that a website would soon be released to allow users to check their eligibility for the claim. Pills and apostles could be upgraded during this window between snapshot and claim. But BYOPills and apostles could only be used once for claiming, and so a claim check link would be provided in case anyone was to try and upgrade either of them on the secondary market. February 22nd saw the eligibility website go live, but it wasn't until March 1st that the next set of key information was released. On this date, details revealed that BYOCraft claiming was set to happen on March 10th, with the claim window remaining open for 2 weeks, closing on March 24th. After some heavy testing, it was confirmed that despite complexities in the contract, the doc had decided that claiming would be possible to go live on Ethereum L1. Whilst this was exciting information for the community, the announcement ended by saying, "This is just the start. Expect land selection details and dates to be announced once the BYOCraft claiming window opens." Oh yeah, remember? Phase 3 of BioLand? That was still in the works. More on that soon. Finally, it had arrived. March 10th was here, and it was BYOCraft minting day. A small adjustment to the claiming window made it open for 3 weeks, as opposed to 2, now extended to March 31st. It was said that, in efforts to allow you to mint the crafts at the earliest date possible, reduce gas, have minting happen on L1, and improve selection efficiency and integrity, we opted for a delayed reveal given the complexity of our minting mechanics. In addition to that, around 50,000 crafts have to be generated together with their own assets and animations that will also have to go through the team for quality and in-engine tests to make sure quality is up to our standards. This process has already begun, but we'll be making sure to take the time needed in order to ensure everything required. The tone of this particular announcement perhaps showcased a glimpse of the team battling to balance community expectations of speed. What with such a rush in 2021, with their own standards, now of the communities too, of high-quality outputs, which often take the necessary time. BYO have always been about quality, sometimes needing to adjust their timelines to keep to this, which was often misunderstood. But anyway, such is life. The full reveal of crafts was set to take place on March 20th. Shortly after craft claiming went live, Boris the cook made an announcement. It was short but sweet, as usual with him, simply stating, "Your next pod is going to be interesting." A picture of a vape pod was attached with glowing green material inside, with the words "May Burn Vape" written on it. This riddled the community. With community members gradually moving to claim their crafts, it wasn't long until March 20th came around and BYOCrafts, in all their glory, were revealed. After refreshing their metadata, BYOCraft holders were now able to see their ride alongside its traits and stats. It was instantly obvious that meticulous work had gone into these. The team had done it again. It was then said that the full 3D animations would be provided after the claiming window closed on March 31st, where holders would be able to appreciate them even more. To round off this announcement, the team mentioned that a lot was happening behind the scenes, and that they were to announce a roadmap update sometime later this week. Only a few days later, on March 25th, the team dropped one of their righteously packed updates to provide insights on what had been happening beyond the recent focus on BYOCrafts. It started off with bringing BioLand development, selection, and reveal back into the spotlight. It was said that 2 teams were working on the BYOVERSE world building, with 3D artists working on creating the different zones and terrains for world building, and another team focusing on developing a realistic, logic-based 2D map that the 3D team would use as a reference when building out the world. The 2D map had gone through several iterations to ensure that a high-quality map suitable for the BYOVERSE was made. It was stated that the goal was to bring the map to life, allowing the different types of terrains, their locations, and their climates to explain the history of the BYOVERSE, with the focus being on optimizing the map to fit gameplay while encouraging exploration and earning mechanics. A document was attached, which provided insightful and detailed information on each of the 16 zones, or newly called biomes, across the BYOVERSE. This was a major insight into the serious detail and creativity that was happening behind the scenes. Each biome was said to have varying characteristics and several environmental parameters, whether positive or negative, that distinguish them from one another. Each biome would also have different types of fauna, flora, and resources to interact with. And lastly, it was said that each pill ingredient would also apply a mutation to the biome's base characteristics. Inside the document, readers could find a short description of the lore for each biome as well as their individual environmental parameters, which were across 6 categories including temperature, humidity, radiation, psi wave, fauna, and dust. Already, the early stages of detailed game mechanics and variations were being shown. The community read in awe. The apostles, their attachments and suits, maybe things were starting to connect together. The team mentioned that their land selection mechanics and experience would be different from anything that had been seen across other metaverses, and that holders would be able to select land based on the finalized 3D world map. Again, a disclaimer was provided, stating that, given our strive to create a high-quality map and its significant importance in the future of the BYOVERSE, we want to make sure we're not rushing the development process to reach deadlines. It was then alluded that more detailed information that would impact one's land selection decisions would be drip-fed in the future. Things were getting real. This wasn't just another game clone. The team were building the BYOVERSE from the ground up, and this was only the beginning. The next part of the announcement moved on to discuss the TRYP token. The team mentioned that the token and staking contract had been finalized and were ready for deployment. However, they were taking their time to ensure the token was launched in a proper way. They mentioned the importance of TRYP in the BYOPills ecosystem, and that they wanted to make sure that they were fully compliant with all laws and regulations prior to launch, as well as making sure it was positioned well for a healthy future. It was stated that they were working with an extremely reputable law firm that has experience with other large projects in the NFT and broader blockchain space. This engagement was making sure that all the right things were set in place from a legal perspective. And so, the team were acknowledging the community's calls for the token release, as previously alluded to back in 2021, but stating that while the action itself was relatively simple, the legalities and survivability of it were to be prioritized above all else. After this, the topic of the BYOCraft mini racer game was briefly touched upon. The racer game was said to be in active development, and that video teasers were to be shared soon. On top of this, as the game had been alluded to be play and earn, it fell under the scope of TRYP, and that the game was intended to be released around the time TRYP was out. Next, information was shared about BioWare and BioFigurines, 2 things that would bring the project to life, literally. The first announcement on BioWare was actually released at the end of 2021, just before New Year. The team had been working hard to bring high-quality apparel to the community, stating that they'd set up a full production cycle of a fashion brand that allows fabrication at scale with the ultimate price-to-quality ratio. Pre-orders were said to open soon. On top of this, developments were also in the works with a state-of-the-art 3D manufacturer that would allow for the printing of individual and unique figurines for BYOPills, Apostles, and BYOCrafts, polished and painted to be an exact replica of one's NFT. Of course, the community was sent raving again, waiting eagerly to get their hands on some of that BYO merch. The last two topics of this announcement focused on the light paper and a BYO marketplace. It was said that as the team continues to work on the BYOVERSE, they've been taking all the information development through the previous months and compiling them into a well-organized light paper that highlights the project vision, backstory, world components, core gameplay, and economy. Their goal was to deliver this to the community sometime soon so that they would start to gain a better sense of the BYOVERSE. As for the marketplace, the team had apparently started to develop their own marketplace web app, which would allow holders to buy and sell all sorts of BYO assets right on their website. This would also act as the base marketplace for everything to come with TRYP and in-game assets. And lastly, as if that wasn't already enough, one loaded sentence ended the announcement. It read, "By the way, your next BYOVAPE pod will burn your vape in May, and it will be worth it." And so the community was left with much to chew on. As the next few days passed, the time for holders to claim their crafts was shortening, to which the team put out a reminder for those who had yet to do so. But on the 30th March, an announcement dropped with a video attached that detailed information on the TRYP token. Let's take a listen.
Tryptamine, better known as TRYP, is the most sought-after compound in the BYOVERSE. Its extrasensory effects have become an integral part of the lifestyle of metaverse inhabitants, creating heavy dependency on it. Those who own TRYP yield the power to govern the BYO ecosystem, making it a valuable commodity. Holders have the luxury of new gear, creatures, consumables, and much more. BYOPills trigger the secretion of tryptamine in apostles. Different apostles secrete different amounts of TRYP. The more BYOPills are ingested, the more TRYP is released. It is then extracted from their brains in a process called neuroassimilation. Rest assured, it's a pain-free process. Bioland resources are also a major source of tryptamine after the proper refinement and processing has occurred. The more abundant your land, the more TRYP is generated. TRYP is finite, so handle it with care. As with great power comes great responsibility.
What a beautiful and informative video from the team. However, as detailed in prior announcements, there was still some work to be done before holders could get their hands on the token. And so with that, the narrative continued to remain focused on other developments. April had arrived, which meant that the craft claiming window had passed. A total of 8,150 crafts were claimed. Upon announcing that the claiming window had closed, the team revealed that BYOVAPEs had now been discharged. With all the talk about the other green pod and it burning holders' vapes, this left much curiosity in the air. 1 week later, on April 8th, the time had come where all BYOCrafts metadata had been updated to reveal their full 3D animation, in all their glory and prestige. Of course, the community was incredibly happy with this update as, once again, the team had exceeded expectations and delivered yet another identifiable uniqueness within this space. These 3D game-ready crafts were stunning and future-proof. With the 3D animations for BYOCrafts now revealed, a few weeks passed to allow the dust to settle and to prepare for the next batch of information related to land selection to start rolling out. From towards the end of April and throughout May, the team started to drip-feed critical details to the community that would support them in their endeavor to place their lands within the BYOVERSE. Of course, some game mechanics were caveated with disclaimers of potential changes within the future as developments continued, but it provided a solid grounding to work with. Let's take a look at the video teaser released at the time.
Gather round, people of the BYOVERSE. You are about to enter extremely dangerous territory. If at some point you came to think that you would peacefully grow resources and gather them safely in your land, it's unfortunate, because that's, well, simply not happening. You might have misinterpreted the legacy left by Boris. Your actions have consequences. Cooperation is key. Trade routes will need to be secured. Nothing comes easy, as with higher risk comes higher reward.
Incredible, right? Take a look at that map. And here it began. The community was about to dive deeper into the BYOVERSE. Funnily enough, the emphasis on danger and consequences perhaps combated conversations amongst some of the community about how they were dreaming of peacefully harvesting their resources and laughing to the bank. They now stood corrected. Beginning on April 23rd and continuing across several weeks, the team began to debrief the community on the BYOVERSE. This included densely packed details on gameplay mechanics, as well as a 2D map of the BYOVERSE. Starting with the beautiful and intricately made 2D map, this wasn't just a simple image. Oh no. There were levels to this map. Remember, this is BYO we're talking about here. On the website it was uploaded to BYODocs. There was a filter provided that allowed users to toggle between 6 different view modes. These were default, trade routes, high fidelity, topographic, landmasses, and tectonic plates. As well as these different filters, users could also toggle landmarks, which were notable sites across the BYOVERSE, and regions, which were how the BYOVERSE was divided up into different locations. Starting with landmarks, there were 12 presented in total. These particular locations held unique lore and were deemed to be key areas where players would gather to participate for various reasons. Some of these locations manifested through lore written by the community. One particular example to note is the Bell Tower. For those of you familiar with the BYO community, you'll know that one outstanding pillager, Kebs, has been ringing the bell upon all project announcements since inception. With his continuous support, the founders deemed it fit to integrate this concept into the BYOVERSE. Moving on to regions, what once started off as 16 zones had since evolved to 16 biomes, with many of these containing different regions. But not all. Take Volcan as an example. The Volcan biome has 3 separate regions located across the BYOVERSE. These include the Surge, the Rip, and Basalt Jaws. This decision added variety to the game mechanics, and also allowed for more choice when considering where to place one's land on the map. In terms of the dense information provided on game mechanics, there is too much detail to cover in full, and so we'll focus on condensing some of the key points that were notably considered for land selection. Location relative to towns and outposts emerged as a primary consideration. These were basically the safe zones where players could trade stuff, use important facilities, and stay out of trouble. Towns had stable bioenergy around them. Think of this as the world's magical field that could either help or mess with your day depending on how stable it was. The stability of this energy could be disrupted by various activities like over-harvesting resources, using BYOPills for crafting or teleportation, and generally exploiting the land too intensively. Transportation planning would be absolutely critical in the BYOVERSE. Players had to think carefully about 2 key aspects: road networks and trade routes. The quality of roads determined how fast one's BYOCraft could go and how much damage it would take, with roads deeper in the wilderness being more likely to deteriorate and be affected by biome hazards. Well-maintained roads near towns were safer and faster to travel on. Trade routes were the organized paths where big convoys would move resources around, with NPC guards helping keep things safe. Having good access to these networks could make or break one's success in the game. Moving resources from point A to point B to trade or sell could get expensive. While teleportation was said to exist, it cost more the more that one carried, so holders had to think carefully about how far they wanted to haul their resources and which transportation methods they'd use. For players wanting to team up, they needed to have 4 connected parcels of bioland to form a guild. They could grow this up to 20 parcels if they wanted to go big, and the cool thing was, these parcels could be connected across different biomes and regions if the map allowed it. Different biomes came with their own risk-reward setup. Rarer biomes promised better rewards, but were way more dangerous to inhabit. Resources weren't spread evenly across the map. Each region had its own special resources, which meant players would need to trade with others to get everything they needed. Who your neighbors would be mattered too. Other players nearby could become trading partners or fierce competitors. That bioenergy we mentioned earlier, it becomes more unstable the further you venture from towns. This could trigger anomalies. Random events like monster attacks or resource bonuses that could either help or hurt you. Holders could boost their resource production by grouping up to 4 biolands together on the map. Finally, players needed to think about defense, natural barriers, escape routes, and ways to control who could access their territory. While each holder had access to the same information, their strategy, or their guild strategy, was going to be different, and would ultimately be governed by the type and number of bioland held. Wow. Even having condensed the information, it's still enough to make one feel dizzy. But remember, we were on the journey of developing a game. Did you really think it was going to be light work? As mentioned previously, this information was released between April and May of 2022. Amongst this wave, it was stated that the official land selection website would be launched on May 31st. Initially, the site was said to launch in Explore-only mode, for the purpose of giving holders adequate time to familiarize themselves with the platform and prepare for launch. Remember, once a particular parcel location had been filled, it was gone forever. That is, unless the person who so desired a particular parcel was later able to teeth it out of their new opponent. Holders were said to be given 2 weeks of familiarization before the real land selection went live. And so, as the community tried to wrap their head around all of the game mechanics, the days drew closer to the end of May, until finally, the team dropped version 1 of the BYOVERSE Map Explorer. It had arrived, the BYOVERSE Map Explorer. The 2D had now become 3D, and the community was here for it. This web app was a truly unique experience put out by the team. In this initial version, users could explore the map using 2 different modes, World Mode and Fly Mode. World Mode provided users a top-down view of the BYOVERSE, while the Fly Mode provided a more intricate and magnified view, allowing for a close-up inspection of the different terrains. It was emphasized that this was the first version of the map, and that updates would follow within the next week to include full towns and landmarks. This update would also overlay a grid on top of the map in Fly Mode to help decide the exact parcels that one would want to select. Alongside the announcement of the V1 Map Explorer, the team also dropped some info on Bioland Reveal. Remember? This was still in the works, but perhaps closely tied to the development of the 3D Map Explorer. Attached to the announcement were some draft examples of what the land reveal might look like. The visual file would become infographic-like, detailing the biome of the land, the abundancy, the ingredient or resource, as well as the environmental parameters of that particular biome. It was said that some new traits post-land selection would also be included, such as the specific region of each bioland as well as the coordinates on the map. And then next, in classic BYO style, the team dropped another one of those by-the-way announcements. This one revealed that the BYOVERSE would be built on Unreal Engine 5, which had only just been released back in April. The reasons for this choice were cited as being future-proof for the longevity and success of the BYOVERSE, and because the engine would provide high-end physics, animation, and lighting systems that would allow the team to achieve the realism they had always dreamt of. Pretty cool, right? 1 week later, on June 8th, the team pushed an update to the Map Explorer, version 1.1. This update focused on website performance optimization to make it more accessible across a range of devices, as per feedback from the community, particularly those with potatoes. It was stated that the website was experimental and that it would keep going through iterative updates until all was perfect for land selection. Perhaps this was foreshadowing an extension to the original 2-week timeline. The community didn't receive an announcement from the team until roughly 2 weeks later. This update provided some further information on both Bioland Reveal and Land Selection Phase 2. It was said that, After a couple weeks of dedicated work on internal game design and Bioland terrains, we are now happy to announce the full terrain reveal of Biolands, and that this metadata update would happen on June 28th. Next, acknowledging the wait, Phase 2 of land selection was set to happen next week. This would include the grid overlay and mechanics of coordinate selection, allowing the community to familiarize themselves with these new features. Only after the pilot is complete, planning done by the community and checks for compatibility across all devices, would Phase 3 begin, which would be the real deal. The website was set to be updated on July 1st. It was also mentioned that mobile support was going to be introduced in exploration mode only, allowing users to access the platform across different devices. Less than a week later, June 28th arrived and the Biolands had undergone their final stages of terraforming and were now alive. Having refreshed their metadata, holders were able to see their land in full. The new and updated visual was said to be a representation of the in-game terrain one would experience in the BYOVERSE, unveiling that this update was heavily tied to the continuous development and refinement of the BYOVERSE game world that was still hidden behind closed doors. A few days later, as promised, the team announced updates to the Map Explorer, featuring 70% faster loading, improved optimization, parcel selection, and mobile support. After implementing the grid, they counted roughly 36,970 tiles, though only 10,056 land plots would ever exist within this space. The system was nearly ready for launch, pending final region allocations and testing. Phase 3's date was to be announced soon. But let's take a step back for a minute, because an important change to the project Discord had taken place around this time. On June 24th, the team added a Com Updates Discord channel to share more frequent project updates, while keeping major announcements separate. This responded to community feedback from Twitter Spaces, typically hosted by Lou, a veteran pillager, as well as various Discord messages about staying better connected. A snippet from the first message in that channel read, "In an effort to keep the BYO community more in touch with the project as we continue to build every day, we'll be posting more frequent updates here." A few days after this new channel dropped and amongst the wait for land selection, P dropped some alpha related to BYOVERSE player types, alongside an impressive infographic. Behind the scenes, the team had identified over 10 different types of players that would roam the BYOVERSE, including their main activities and associated skills. Some examples featured within the infographic included Land Manager, Trader, Dominator, and Pillcrafter, which were positioned slightly different across the four-tiered axis. This update shone a light on the complexities that were taking place behind the scenes, as well as the seriousness of the team in their endeavor to develop the BYOVERSE. But of course the question remained, when? In continuing to cover some important events that happened around this time, the team dropped a message in the Discord on June 10th to say that they had just finished recording a podcast. However, it wasn't until July 13th, just over a month later, that it was uploaded to YouTube. The team were unaware that this would be the case at the time, as they chose this medium as a long-form update to the community, but ended up having to adhere to the other party's timeline. The podcast was just under 1 hour long and was hosted by Josh Gordon as part of the Unstoppable Domains YouTube channel. Of course, the conversations held were extensive and insightful, but cannot be covered in full here, so let's listen to some cherry-picked clips of words of wisdom, straight from the team's mouths.
And I mean, in terms of development perspective, this is one thing that we had to speak of and let the NFT space know about, because in reality, game development takes time, and I think you know that, a lot of people know that. And it's complex, features have to be written properly, you want to avoid bugs, you want to deliver a proper deliverable for people to enjoy, especially when there's tokens and earning mechanics and all that, and everything's intertwined. So when you have different features coming in and different community feedback coming in, you will have to take your time and just adhere your features, start changing things here and there to adapt your game and make it work the right way. And this is why we don't usually release lots of footage from the actual BYOVERSE, because we're trying to bring in the most important feedback we got from the community, put it in before we release any in-game footage. And for us, that's the priority. I mean, we could have just released a simple BioVerse based on what we thought was perfect without the community's feedback, but that would have been, what the community wanted. So, and that's why we usually take more of our time in terms of the game development aspect of things, and we think it'll pay off big time, hopefully in the future. I mean, see, like we're talking. Hopefully, we're talking months for our first version of the game, but and that's when we talk about different versions that are coming. It's not gonna be only one version, but we want the community to see something, to feel something, and just get into that game, and then we can start adding and keep on like updating the game. But we just don't want them to wait multiple years until they see a first version, because that wouldn't be fair. But that's the thing that we wanted to discuss, and the complex thing about game development. Sometimes in studios, in traditional studios, when you have a feature list, that feature list is set in stone. The reason why it's set in stone is because any change in that feature list might affect the whole list, might affect any other feature dependent on that feature, and then the team will have to rework a lot of things. Deadlines are going to change, timing is going to change, and this is why we're shifting towards this no deadline way of doing things, because we think that if we want to take community feedback, add it into the pipeline every other week or so, and then switch things up depending on these changes that we're getting from the community, I think it might extend the timeline a bit, but that's only for the benefit of the community and for the actual game. I mean, we could just disregard all this feedback, develop on the old timeline, and just deliver something which is not what the community wanted. Yeah. So we would prioritize having everything ready for the community rather than just like crunching our timeline. Makes and of sense. Course, we prioritize quality. So we want such a good quality game to be out there.
So when I think of BYOPills, I really think of it as two verticals. One as BYOPills as consumables that are interoperable with other games, and the second vertical being our own BYOVERSE, where all the assets that we've released are provided utility within our own game and MMORPG eventually. I think like one of the most challenging things for tokens is creating a token that's really sustainable. Having a good balance between demand and supply. And I think so far we've seen a lot of difficulties in the space when it comes to token launch. Supply is really we've seen many examples, some that work, some that don't. And you could control supply as a project owner through vesting schedules, unlock schedules, and all these sort of things. But what's more important is while everyone's trying to figure out the supply side, it's really important to figure out the demand side of things, and that balance is what's going to create a sustainable token. So the demand side all goes back to, and I know this has been talked about before, is how fun is the game itself. I mean, you want people to really want to go and buy these tokens to spend to use in the game to upgrade their player experience or to enhance it or buy items. So like you said, in RuneScape, people are buying RuneScape Gold on eBay, right? So they're doing that because they really enjoy the game and they want to be able to, to instead of maybe grind for hours to try to get a certain drop of item, they want to be able to just go and buy it on the market. So the most challenging part is creating that demand and an organic demand, not just one where it's like, all right, I'm buying the token just because the price is going up, because that's not sustainable. You're going to almost always see it crash down eventually. And we've seen that across many projects. It's how do you make that token circulate back within the economy? And that's the main focus here, is to create a fun game and a way where that token could be spent on many different factors and not just one. One thing I think I learned is it's tough to airdrop a good amount of token to the community when there is no demand yet for that token, right? So I think right now, the price of the token has been going down, and obviously that upsets a lot of investors. But really, that's why we're taking the staking approach, at least initially, the 6-month staking program for TRYP, because we know we're still developing the game. We know that we're still building the demand factors for the game. So we don't want to airdrop a 15% of the token initially, where you're going to have a bunch of holders holding the token that without real utility. So in my opinion, the only way it's going to go is down, right? There's no use cases for that. But by prolonging that supply factor over 6 months or more, and allowing us to develop different aspects and and faucets and sinks for the token, then all of a sudden you have a much more sustainable token and also a happy community. So that's why I think taking our time into not just the legal side of things and making sure we're compliant with the ever-changing regulations in the space, but also developing demand factors that are sustainable for the token is really important for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we discussed this internally a lot. I wanted to chime in on that, and Peter always mentions that. Like, I mean, on Discord, when we see the when token question, this is the question that we opt out of at the moment because we really know what we're trying to do in terms of the token. And I mean, we're having constant legal meetings with really the ever-changing regulations, especially after what happened to Luna. You know, the thing that happened to Luna is going to add more regulations now, so they ask us more questions. So really, it's just a domino effect on the space. But we really care more about the community and having a sustainable long-term token. We really don't care about pumping than dumping, and or like we understand it's free money and people will enjoy it, but we'd rather have them enjoy something long term. And we just don't want to see a community that's gonna, like, 80% of it is gonna leave because of just a crash in price, and then, you know, all the work we've been doing and all the project we've been building is just gonna go, you know, in the dump just because we released the token. We rushed the token and it just crashed or something bad happens. Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do. We really want to try and build something very sustainable. I mean, on a technical perspective, deleting lots of code and rewriting it is just the community doesn't see that. And let's say we're opting to deliver on a Monday, it's Saturday, and we release that we find out that there's something that might, you know, make the drop not so smooth or make the experience not so smooth. We are really that team that would just scrap the whole thing and rewrite it from Saturday till Monday, if it comes down to that. And yeah, it happens frequently sometimes. And even now, like the game, we're moving some modules from Unity to Unreal. We don't care. We never mention it to the community because it's our passion. It's what we're building. It's the long-term vision. But, you know, these are things that take work. You know, if you would say to a traditional gamer, a game developer, why don't you move from Unity to Unreal? I don't think he would ever do that. So yeah, we see the benefits in moving, and we don't care about the actual work that's gonna go into it. So
Yeah.
and we don't want it to extend our timeline heavily. So we'll put in the extra time to actually move these assets.
Well, I think you did a good job explaining why we're using Unreal. Basically, also, I would like to add the fact that the way the lighting works in Unreal and the way it generates these hyper-realistic scenes, the tech that it uses just makes it faster to get these results than any other program, which is crucial also to building the BYOVERSE. And also the fact that you can take film assets now and have them be usable in games, which gives us this push in the visual style, which is perfect for the BYOVERSE.
Interesting, huh? Great to hear from them as real people. Anyway, if you haven't realized, we're now over 40 minutes into the video. Check your posture, make sure you're hydrated, and let's continue on with the journey. So before we took a step back to cover the Com Updates Discord channel and some clips from the podcast, we were at July 1st, where the team had just released an update to the Map Explorer that integrated a grid overlay with approximate parcel count. From here, the next two updates came just over 2 weeks later on July 16th, which just happened to be the BYOPills project's 1-year anniversary. To start with, Boris the Cook addressed the community with the following speech. Greetings, my dear lab rats. 1 year ago today, you rescued me from the depths of my own mind, and I will be forever grateful. We are on the path to fulfilling my grand vision, and am proud to have you pave the way to the future. I have requested a manifest of you all to reward you with a token of my appreciation. Stay vigilant, pillagers. The manifest he spoke of? Well, this manifested as the BYOPill Year 1 NFT that all BYOPills holders received as part of a snapshot taken on that day. It was a beautiful, custom-made pill that included all of the assets that had been developed by the project up until that time. And, of course, it included the sign of an eye, representing the vision that was held by both the team and the community. And then next, on the topic of snapshots, the team announced that in partnership with Lost Boy, the project that was developing the soundtrack for the BYOVERSE, a snapshot had been taken of BioLand holders. Oh yeah, remember? The news that kicked the year off? The full soundtrack was still in the works. It was stated that for each biome held, holders would later be able to claim one free BYOCassette NFT. Each type of BYOCassette would represent the exclusive soundtrack of that respective biome, only playable in-game by the holder. Some of BYOCassette NFT's artwork was leaked around this time, revealing some visually pleasing animations tailored to each biome. Alongside the visuals, a 20-second clip of the related soundtrack was also released as a teaser. It was then said that BYOPill-only holders were not left out. Those who held a BYOPill and a Lost Boy NFT would be able to claim the first-ever exclusive soundtrack of the BYOVERSE, The First Morning. This snapshot was said to take place the following week. On that following week, July 24th, after the BYOPill plus Lost Boy snapshot had taken place, the team said to expect a Map Explorer update and final land selection date to be announced in the coming days. Then, 2 days later on July 26th, the long-awaited final update on the Map Explorer had arrived. The new features had restricted selection of certain areas like towns, rivers, and roads, marking them with distinct colors on an updated map with a new legend. Players gained the ability to download their tile selections to share with guild members for planning. Alongside this, an FAQ document was provided, summarizing and responding directly to community questions, which was slightly more direct than the previous heavily loaded documentation. We'll now provide an overview of the additional information provided in this document. Up to 4 parcels could be selected and confirmed using gasless transactions at once. Successfully claimed parcels would be marked black on the map, with hover functionality displaying crucial data like coordinates, zone, and region information. The system would automatically update metadata on OpenSea and other exchanges upon confirmation. The resource system would introduce 2 distinct types: unique ingredients that could only be found on player lands or deep wilderness, which would be different from biome resources which would be available throughout the BYOVERSE. Production boost mechanics would require straight connections. Diagonal arrangements wouldn't be recognized. Holders could arrange lands in L shapes, squares, or straight lines to maximize efficiency. Production optimization technology would be unlockable through the land management skill tree, starting with menial boosts that could be upgraded as players progress. The water system would distinguish between deep waters, which would be impassable, and shallow water along coastlines and islands that could be traversed using vehicles such as BYOCrafts. While BioLand relocation was seemingly confirmed as a future feature, it would come at significant cost to both currency and progression. Environmental mechanics would include wind trap systems for water access in dry biomes, and altitude-based scanning advantages. Population density would become a critical factor, directly impacting BYO energy stability in developed areas. Finally, it was announced that the official land selection date would be on August 26th, exactly 1 month later, with a note to say that there would be no reason to rush as the window to select one's land would be open indefinitely. Not too much happened during that month gap, at least things that were public-facing. Though during this time the community had requested accurate parcel count per region across the map, to which the team responded to in the Com Updates channel and provided the raw data to quench the pillagers' curiosity. With the new features implemented, particularly the unselectable land plots, the total count of selectable parcels was now said to be 28,748. And so before we move to the build-up of the land selection release in August, let's take a step back to cover a teaser video released by the doc back in April, not long after the BYOCrafts had their 3D animations revealed. Here, we see a BYOCraft inside a test environment. The tweet read, "Craft and camera mechanics locked and loaded for the racer, adaptable for all movements, collisions, and ground heights." But soon we would be in the middle of August, and still no sign of the mini racer game. But anyway, let's keep on track with the narrative. Maybe there's a reason. August 23rd rolled around, meaning it was only 3 days until the release of land selection. The team reminded the community of all resources put out to help them with their decision-making. And then it came, August 26th, and land selection was now live. Despite the time finally arriving, it was again relayed that there was no rush as the selection window would be open indefinitely. But, despite this, several pillagers still rushed to position their lands across the BYOVERSE to slowly but surely determine its fate. Now we're going to take a step back here to fully take in the fact that the randomization of land selection, governed by holders of biolands, made it so that the ingredients would be scattered across the BYOVERSE in an unknown manner, fully placing the future strategies of harvesting and gameplay into an unknown territory that was determined by the community. It would become the true essence of Web3 gaming, where players not only owned their land, but were part of the world building itself. Marvelous. In stealing from the future, some bright spark community member called Miss B had set out to continuously plot the evolving ingredient distribution across the BYOVERSE map in none other than Excel, bringing clarity to an otherwise overwhelming distribution plot. In an impressive feat of work, involving a spreadsheet with over 106,000 cells, this pillager holds the secrets of which ingredients lie where and how would one potentially optimize their harvesting strategy. The month of September was perhaps a quiet one. The pillagers were watching the number of placed lands slowly tick up, but no main announcements came from the team, at least those related to the BYOVERSE, or what we might refer to as the project's main questline. But remember, interoperability was also an important feature for the team, of which partnerships with other projects were always in the pipeline. This month also included a few updates on this note, as did previous months, but it is preferred to cover these at the end of the year. And so for now we shall consider September over. October had a bit more juice to squeeze. But remember, this whole narrative is all drawn from the community's perspective. The stories of what was happening behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis remain untold, though the podcast revealed the team's humility in scrapping and redeveloping ideas without gloating to the community. The month started off with Doc showing off a close-up view of Jathika's texture work of a writer BYOCraft in-game engine. Pretty hot, right? And then on the very next day, Doc also dropped some videos showing some stress testing in-game real-time generation and building of crafts, considering physics, collisions, and elements, from external metadata with no bottlenecks on client devices. In other words, testing how smoothly the game can create detailed BYOCrafts without slowing down your device. Then around a week and a half later, the next major project announcement arrived on October 13th. This one detailed the introduction of the BYOHub. The BYOHub was said to be a mobile-friendly website where all BYO users would create an account that they would be able to link their wallets to, then forming an account that would accompany them in their journey to the BYOVERSE, and most importantly, the BYORacer as the first release. It was said that the BYOHub would represent everything in one place, including player stats, progress, collected items, and more. It would form as a one-stop shop for everything user-related in the future. It would also house the future internal BYO marketplace and codex. In other words, this was the infrastructure necessary for creating an account for connection to the game, just like an Xbox or PlayStation account, but for Web3. This wasn't just progress. It was the reveal of the fundamental architecture that would power every player's journey into the game world, serving as the gateway between Web3 wallets and the interactive gaming experience. Alongside this announcement, it was said that the BYOHub would drop in increments, starting with account creation and wallet linking, and that the date for initial release would be announced soon in the future. On October 23rd, a short and pithy announcement stated that the initial release of the BYOHub would occur on November 14th, and then fast-forwarding a few weeks later to this date, it had come true. The initial version of the BYOHub went live, allowing users to create their account and link their Web3 wallets. It was reiterated that this initial version was purely for setting up and address linking, and to not expect anything further at this stage. Updates would be rolled out as they continued to develop on the front end and back end, with the next update targeting the assets page, where users would be able to visualize all assets linked to their account. After this, No main announcements came to the Discord for the remainder of 2022. However, there was a fair amount of activity on Twitter, now known as X, to which we'll now take a look at. On November 29th, the doc shared some clips of community-requested BYOCrafts flying around a test environment to demonstrate in-game mechanics. The crafts looked beautiful, and the physics a work of art too. Then on December 13th, the official project Twitter released a video teasing some BYOVERSE footage and related lore. Let's take a watch.
We never asked to wear these masks. This world made us do it. What we thought was a curse was the greatest gift of all. Because now we know who we really are.
December 15th saw another BYOCraft teaser leak from the doc, this time showing some trail system as part of in-game feedback mechanisms testing. Several photos were released around this time too. One showed an apostle running through what looked like a stormy environment, perhaps a nod to the continuous development of the BYOVERSE behind scenes. Some poster-type images of the different types of BYOCrafts were also revealed, adding to the curiosity. But as far as this goes, we've roughly covered the year of 2022 within the BYOPills project. We'll now loop back to cover partnerships and events that happened throughout the year, before then moving to frame the wider context of the year 2022 and how this impacted the project. In terms of partnerships, the BYO team continued to strive for their mission of interoperability alongside their own game world. Throughout 2022, several partnerships or extensions to existing ones formed. As usual, these manifested from receiving whitelist spots through to integration of BYO NFTs into other metaverses. Some of these partnerships or integrations included Council of Kings, Chibi Clash, NFT 2040, Wanderers, Legends of Venari, Galaxy Fight Club, Pixel Apostles with Da Circus, World Wide Web, Jenkins the Valet, and Medicaid. We're only going to focus on Legends of Venari, Galaxy Fight Club, and Pixel Apostles, as these examples provide more substance than the others. In the true sense of interoperability, BYOPill holders received a 2-week demo pass to the Legends of Venari game world, known as Kairos. This blockchain game is all about luring, taming, and collecting creatures called Venari, kind of like Pokemon. Pillagers holding a BYOPill NFT were dropped 2 times purple slurps and 1 time purple clematis oil each day of the event, which acted as special bait to attract different tiers of Oros, which were the event-exclusive Venari. Those who did not own a BYOPill NFT had to purchase these powerful baits through the in-game shop, showing a perfect example of being the consumables of the metaverse and bringing extended value to these pills outside of the BYOVERSE and BYO-related asset drops. Next, Galaxy Fight Club, the mobile arena battle game, held a cross-IP championship tournament of which BYOPills was invited to. BYOPill and Apostle holders had exclusive access to a BYOPill character to represent the community in their tournaments. This was on top of the already existing GFC-exclusive BYOPills. The community managed to walk away from the tournament with a participation medal. We take those. And then finally, Pixel Apostles. Pixel Apostles started off as a community initiative developed by community member Da Circus. Around the middle of 2022, he released an indie game called Poppin' Pills, which kept several community members entertained, with several iterations released based on feedback. Then, around the 1-year anniversary of the project, the team decided to form a competition around this game with the top 5 scores receiving a Bioland. This game has an iconic soundtrack to it also made by Da Circus. It goes a little something like, catchy, right? Later on in the year, the project actually worked with Da Circus to help bring Pixel Apostles to life across the entire collection, with a link provided that produced a sprite sheet of any apostle. This collection-based integration then enabled Pixel Apostles to be integrated into pixel-based metaverses, such as World Wide Web 3, for further interoperability within the project. Alongside these partnership events, the project also hosted a few poker games with generous enough prize pools, as well as a few BYO quizzes with Bio NFT prizes. But let's move on to recap the project throughout 2022 and explore the wider context. 2022 had much to offer to the pillagers. They received 3D Apostle animation updates, the minting of BYOCrafts, BYOCraft 3D animation updates, 2D maps of the BYOVERSE, initial insights into the BYOVERSE game mechanics, BioLand visual updates, land selection on the 3D map, a 1-year anniversary pill, the initial foundations of the BYOHub, and many other leaks throughout. But what about what didn't happen? There was no TRYP, no BYOVERSE experience, no mini racer game, no light paper, no BioWare or figurines, the BioVapes never burned, and the green pod remained a mystery. So what happened? Well, to answer this question, we have to zoom out from within the project to consider the broader market in which it operated. You see, the BYOPills project is a metaverse gaming project involving NFTs, which form as an extension to the wider crypto environment. When the project launched and began to take its first step, it was lucky enough, or perhaps planned as such, to have the might of the bull market behind it. That is, when numbers go up almost every day. However, it is well known that markets phase through cycles of bear and bull. And you've guessed, the bear had approached during 2022. One could say that the project caught the tail end of the bull, as did NFTs in general, as liquidity cycled through various assets until the noise gradually stopped. But the market didn't just peacefully decline. Oh no, 2022 would bring moments that changed everything. The downward spiral was already in motion since late 2021, but what followed were catastrophic events that would shake crypto to its core. In May, Terra Luna's collapse became the first major domino to fall. What began as whispers of instability in their algorithmic stablecoin UST turned into a $60 billion wipeout that echoed through the entire market. Then came Celsius, a platform that had promised dreamlike yields to everyday investors. Behind those promises lay a house of cards. When they froze withdrawals in June, billions in customer funds were trapped overnight. The truth emerged. They'd been running what essentially amounted to a crypto Ponzi scheme. But the final blow? That came from what many considered crypto's crown jewel, FTX. In November, this $32 billion empire crumbled in days when investigations revealed the unthinkable. Customer funds had vanished into their sister company, Alameda Research. The collapse of one of crypto's largest exchanges left countless investors devastated, and trust in centralized crypto platforms shattered. Each of these disasters rippled through the entire crypto ecosystem, draining both capital and confidence from the market. For projects like BYOPills who were actively building during this period, this created an entirely different environment from the bull market that had fueled initial growth. What was once a landscape of abundant opportunity had transformed into one where survival and sustainable development took center stage. So why did we need to cover this? Because while everyone could see what was being built, and the community was very excited by it all, rushing these releases during the crypto winter could have killed the project's chances of survival. This was especially true for TRYP, the token that was meant to be the backbone of the entire BYOVERSE. The project released a clip of the BYOVERSE back in the month of May titled, "Weather the Storm." This was perhaps used to show some details of the harsh environments within the BYOVERSE, as well as a metaphor to describe the wider conditions at the time. Let's take a listen.
The great winter. Dreadful it may be, but necessary it is. Bleak, cold, harsh, and dormant. You feel weak, tired, and on the edge of death. But fear not, for in every winter's heart there is a trembling spring.
A ray of optimism amongst the cold conditions. At least someone was being positive. With all of these negative connotations tied to the crypto space, the project also placed more emphasis on neutralizing the language used across their main website, taking away key blockchain trigger words that would potentially disrupt the perceptions of traditional gamers or the general public. It was said that, while the blockchain powers our products and future launches, the focus should not be on the infrastructure, but rather on the user experience. And then finally, before we move on to cover 2023, there was an unofficial update provided in the Com Updates channel from P-Ether towards the middle of December. It is most fitting to cover it here at the end, as it addressed many of the community's concerns about all of the things that had not happened yet for the reasons we now know. The team had initially planned to release TRYP during the bull market's peak, but several factors led them to reconsider. The bear market, legal complexities, and concerns about long-term sustainability all played a role in this decision. Rather than rushing out a token that would rely on temporary spikes from exclusive drops, the team wanted to build something with lasting value driven by actual utility, like gameplay demand. This same thinking applied to the BYOVAPE burn mechanic. It was said that one of the main reasons behind the BYOVAPE burn mechanic was tied to expanding the community base, with the burning of an asset being tied to something of value. However, launching it during a bear market would have diluted value across all holders, especially with fewer new participants entering the space. Instead, the team shifted their focus to product development, preparing for the next market cycle. The update revealed that the light paper was in its final stages, with particular attention being paid to TRYP's tokenomics. This would outline how the token would function in-game, without creating pay-to-win mechanics, its role in the marketplace, and the overall game economy. Once released, this would open the door for more direct community involvement in the project's direction. Throughout these updates, the team relayed that there was still yet to be a game that had fully cracked the code on what a successful token launch should look like, and that their ambition was to change that. A notable point of discussion within the community was the steady stream of partnership announcements, while updates about the BYOVERSE itself seemed less frequent. Many wondered why these collaborations took precedence over core development updates. The team maintained that these partnerships weren't just strategic moves, but essential groundwork for their initial vision of true digital ownership and interoperability. Looking ahead into the new year, the community was said to expect the first versions of the BioRacer, the light paper, and some official lore releases, but in no particular order. And so with all of that, we have now covered the year 2022 in the BYOPills project. It was perhaps not what 2021 had hoped it would be, but the team were still cooking, laying out the foundations, and building for the future. Regardless of the wider conditions, the team still had the faith of the core community behind them, and they were grateful to be on this journey alongside them. And so with no sign of giving up, let's take a look at what 2023 brought to life.